What really happened to Adam and Eve after they were cast out of Eden? The Bible tells us how their story began, but what about how it ended? Ancient Hebrew, Ethiopian, and apocryphal texts reveal a haunting account of their final days, of regret, redemption, and the return to the dust from which they came. This is not just a tale of death. It's a revelation of love, loss, and divine mercy at the dawn of humanity. Join us as we uncover how Adam and Eve died, the final moments of the first humans. The story of Adam and Eve is perhaps the most famous narrative in human history, marking the beginning of humanity as the Bible presents it. We know of their creation, their life in the Garden of Eden, their transgression, and their expulsion. Yet, one of the most intriguing and often overlooked questions is, how did they die? What were the final moments of the first humans? To answer this, we must move beyond the familiar Genesis account, delving into ancient texts, Jewish and Ethiopian traditions, and the symbolism embedded in their story. Life after Eden, the burden of mortality. The first clue lies in the nature of the curse God pronounced upon Adam and Eve after their disobedience. Genesis 3 verse 19 states, "By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return." This verse reveals a fundamental truth. Mortality was not merely a physical inevitability, but a spiritual and existential reality imposed as a consequence of their actions. From that moment, Adam and Eve were destined to experience death, a fate they had never known in Eden's perfect environment. Their post-Eden existence was marked by hardship. They cultivated the land through toil, bore children, and witnessed the struggles of human life firsthand. According to some Jewish mystical texts, such as the Book of Jubilees and other pseudepigraphal writings, Adam and Eve lived for centuries, but each year was filled with a growing awareness of mortality. Their lives became a bridge between the perfection of Eden and the imperfection of the human condition. The aging of Adam. Jewish traditions offer more specific accounts of Adam's later years. According to the life of Adam and Eve, a collection of apocryphal writings, Adam lived for 930 years. This text provides a rich portrayal of his final moments, emphasizing his consciousness of sin, the weight of his legacy, and the anticipation of reuniting with God in death. In these accounts, Adam's death is not sudden. It is a protracted process, reflective of the spiritual and physical burdens he carried. His body, though initially perfect, gradually succumbed to the weariness and decay inherent in mortality. Interestingly, some mystical interpretations suggest that Adam's death was also a symbolic act. In Kabbalistic teachings, Adam's passing represents the first human transition from divine closeness to the inevitability of separation. His soul, according to these texts, remained connected to God, offering humanity a model for spiritual endurance, even in the face of inevitable death. The moment of death, therefore, was not simply a biological event, but a spiritual milestone, the first human to navigate the passage from life to eternity. Eve's final days. Eve, too, faced death in a manner intertwined with both sorrow and wisdom. In apocryphal accounts, she lived slightly fewer years than Adam, often recorded as 930 years or close, depending on the tradition. The conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan provides vivid imagery of her final days, a period of reflection, prayer, and preparation for the journey beyond life. Unlike the popular depictions of Eve as merely the temptress or secondary figure, these texts highlight her enduring role as matriarch, teacher, and companion to Adam even in the shadow of death. One of the most striking elements of these accounts is Eve's consciousness at death. She is portrayed as fully aware of the consequences of sin, yet also confident in God's mercy. She mourns the loss of Eden, but recognizes the necessity of her experiences, which paved the way for humanity's growth. In this light, Eve's death mirrors a universal human tension, the coexistence of regret and hope, of imperfection and the potential for redemption. The role of Adam and Eve's children. The narrative of Adam and Eve's deaths cannot be separated from the story of their children. Cain, Abel, and later Seth were present in the environment shaped by their parents' mortality. Jewish and Ethiopian traditions often depict Adam and Eve's final moments as communal experiences, where their descendants witnessed the passing of the first humans and absorbed the lessons encoded in their lives. The presence of children at these final moments underscores the continuity of humanity, the passing of mortality from one generation to the next, and the transmission of moral and spiritual lessons. Some texts even suggest that Adam imparted esoteric knowledge to his children in his last moments, a knowledge concerning the workings of the universe, the consequences of sin, and the path back to God. This act positions Adam not merely as a first man in a biological sense, but as a spiritual guide, whose death carried profound implications for the generations that followed. The place and manner of death. The exact location of Adam and Eve's deaths is a subject of debate and legend. While the Bible does not specify, apocryphal traditions provide imaginative details. The life of Adam and Eve describes Adam's death occurring on the Mount of Olives, with his body placed in a cave, while Eve's death is portrayed in proximity, emphasizing their inseparable bond. Some Ethiopian traditions even assert that Adam and Eve were buried together, symbolizing unity and the eternal connection of humanity to its origin. The manner of death, though, is equally symbolic. In many traditions, Adam's and Eve's deaths are gentle, free from violence, signifying the natural course of life and the inevitability of return to dust. Their passing is presented as a transition rather than a punishment, a final stage in a journey that began with divine creation. Spiritual interpretations. Beyond the literal details, the deaths of Adam and Eve carry deep spiritual meaning. In Christian theology, their mortality sets the stage for humanity's need for redemption. Without their awareness of sin and the reality of death, concepts such as salvation, grace, and resurrection would lack context. Adam and Eve's deaths, therefore, are not mere conclusions, but beginnings, the beginning of a spiritual narrative that stretches across millennia. In Jewish mysticism, Adam and Eve's passing also signifies the first human encounter with the divine law of return, from dust to life and back to dust, with the hope of reunion with God's presence. Death is thus framed as a necessary and sacred part of the human journey, imbuing life itself with meaning and urgency. Lessons from their final moments. Examining the final moments of Adam and Eve provides profound insights into the human condition. Several key lessons emerge. The inevitability of mortality. Even beings created directly by God must face the reality of death. This teaches humility and acceptance of life's natural cycles. The weight of choices. Adam and Eve's deaths remind us that our actions have long-term consequences, not just for ourselves, but for generations that follow. The possibility of redemption. Despite their fall, Adam and Eve's deaths are accompanied by divine grace, signaling that human failure is not final. The importance of legacy. Their passing highlights the role of parents and ancestors in shaping the moral and spiritual framework for humanity. The interconnection of life and death. Their story frames death not as a negation of life, but as a continuum, a return to the source from which all life emerges. Apocryphal insights and the Ethiopian tradition. Ethiopian biblical texts, particularly the Book of Adam and Eve, provide some of the most vivid descriptions of their final moments. These texts portray Adam and Eve engaging in prayer, fasting, and contemplation, preparing their souls for the divine presence. In these accounts, death is intertwined with devotion, a recognition that life, even outside Eden, is sacred. The Ethiopian tradition emphasizes that Adam's and Eve's deaths were not private tragedies, but cosmic events, affecting the spiritual fabric of the world and serving as models for human behavior. Symbolism in their passing. Symbolically, Adam and Eve's deaths reflect the tension between innocence and experience, life and mortality, human frailty and divine mercy. Their journey from Eden to dust mirrors the human spiritual journey, beginning in potential, encountering challenges, learning through consequence, and ultimately returning to the source. In art and literature, their deaths have been depicted as serene and dignified, reinforcing the notion that mortality, though inevitable, can be met with grace and understanding. Modern reflections. Today, the story of Adam and Eve's deaths continues to resonate. In theological discourse, it informs debates on the nature of sin, the purpose of life, and the afterlife. In spiritual practice, it serves as a meditation on mortality, encouraging reflection on how we live and how we prepare for our own inevitable end. Psychologically, it reminds humanity of the importance of facing life's finality with awareness, acceptance, and hope. The final moments of Adam and Eve as eternal lessons. The deaths of Adam and Eve represent one of the most profound events in human history. While their story begins in the radiant perfection of the Garden of Eden, it concludes in the somber reality of mortality, marking humanity's first encounter with life's impermanence. Their final moments were far more than the simple cessation of life. They were deeply symbolic, carrying enduring lessons for all generations. These moments illuminate human vulnerability, spiritual responsibility, and the continuity of moral and spiritual legacy. The eternal themes embedded in the human experience. Understanding mortality through Adam and Eve. Before their expulsion from Eden, Adam and Eve existed in a state that was seemingly immune to decay or death. Their bodies were perfect, their minds unburdened by knowledge of mortality, and their existence was in harmony with divine order. Yet, following their disobedience, mortality became inevitable. Genesis 3 verse 19 states, "By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return." This passage signifies not just a physical consequence, but a spiritual reality. The recognition that life is finite, that every action carries weight, and that humanity is tethered to the rhythms of creation in a tangible and inexorable way. Adam and Eve's deaths were thus the first lessons in mortality, the first time humanity was forced to confront the fragility of existence. In many ways, this was a spiritual initiation. Mortality is not merely an endpoint, but a reminder of life's sacredness, prompting reflection, wisdom, and a deepening understanding of the human condition. Their deaths symbolize that life, while fleeting, is precious and must be navigated with care, awareness, and moral responsibility. Adam's passing, endurance, and spiritual responsibility. Adam's final moments exemplify endurance, reflection, and spiritual responsibility. According to the life of Adam and Eve, a collection of apocryphal writings, Adam lived for 930 years, a lifespan that allowed him to experience the full spectrum of human existence. In his final days, he was acutely aware of the consequences of his actions, not merely for himself, but for the generations that would follow. Adam's death was a culmination of a life spent navigating both the blessings and burdens of existence. He bore the weight of knowledge, of good and evil, of loss and regret, and carried the responsibility of passing wisdom to his descendants. The act of dying, therefore, was not passive. It was a conscious and instructive moment, highlighting the first human example of facing mortality with dignity and spiritual awareness. Adam's passing underscores the lesson that life carries responsibilities that extend beyond the individual, that our actions echo into the future, and that moral awareness is essential for navigating existence. In mystical interpretations, Adam's death is also seen as the first human act of spiritual transcendence. Kabbalistic teachings describe Adam's soul ascending to reunite with the divine source, illustrating that death is not the negation of life, but a return to its ultimate origin. This duality, the physical cessation and the spiritual continuation, provides the first human example of embracing both the limitations of mortality and the promise of eternal connection with the divine. Eve's departure, wisdom, courage, and moral nurturing. Eve's death is equally significant, though often overlooked in traditional retellings. She lived alongside Adam, sharing the burdens of post-Eden existence, nurturing children, and shaping the moral framework of humanity. In apocryphal accounts, such as the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, Eve's final moments are depicted as a period of reflection, prayer, and preparation for the divine presence she would soon join. Eve's death exemplifies wisdom and courage. She confronts mortality with full awareness, embracing the inevitability of her return to the dust, while maintaining faith in divine mercy. Her life and passing reinforce the lesson that human existence is a mixture of imperfection and potential for growth. She also serves as a model of moral nurturing, highlighting the critical role of guidance, compassion, and the transmission of ethical understanding to future generations. Together, Adam and Eve's final moments teach humanity that death is not a solitary or purely personal experience. It is intertwined with community, legacy, and the ongoing responsibility of each generation to learn, teach, and endure. Their deaths were not simply biological events, but spiritual milestones, emphasizing that the human journey is as much about moral and spiritual preparation as it is about the passage of time. The continuity of life through their children. The significance of Adam and Eve's deaths is further emphasized when considered alongside their children. Cain, Abel, and Seth, and their descendants, bore witness to the first human deaths. The presence of children during these final moments emphasizes the transmission of knowledge, values, and the awareness of mortality. Their children inherited not just biological traits, but the weight of moral and spiritual legacy. Ancient texts suggest that Adam imparted esoteric knowledge to his children in his final moments, including insights about creation, the consequences of sin, and the path toward reconciliation with the divine. This act of passing wisdom underscores the eternal lesson that life's meaning extends beyond the individual. Adam's and Eve's deaths were simultaneously personal and communal events, illustrating that the end of a life can serve as a teaching moment, a moral compass, and a guide for generations to come. Symbolism in death, from dust to divine connection. The imagery of returning to dust is one of the most enduring lessons from Adam and Eve's final moments. Dust symbolizes mortality, the temporary nature of physical existence, and the shared destiny of all living beings. Yet, within this symbolism lies hope. Dust is not inert. It is the source of life, and life returns to dust only to complete a sacred cycle. The deaths of Adam and Eve also symbolize the bridge between the physical and the spiritual. Their passing demonstrates that mortality is not an ultimate negation, but a transition, a step toward divine reunion. In many traditions, their deaths are portrayed with reverence and solemnity, suggesting that life and death are interconnected, and that human existence gains meaning through both experiences. The symbolism extends to all humanity, We are born from dust, live with awareness and responsibility, and ultimately return to the source from which we were formed. Spiritual reflections and lessons. Adam and Eve's deaths carry profound spiritual lessons, extending beyond narrative or historical interest. These lessons remain relevant to contemporary understanding of life, mortality, and ethical responsibility. Mortality as awareness. Their deaths teach that understanding life's impermanence is essential for living meaningfully. Mortality instills humility and encourages reflection on the choices we make. Responsibility across generations. Adam and Eve demonstrate that our actions have lasting consequences. The moral and spiritual framework we build affects not only ourselves, but the generations that follow. Redemption and hope. Despite their transgressions, Adam and Eve die within the context of divine mercy. This underscores the lesson that human failure is not final. Redemption is always possible. The role of guidance and nurturing. Eve's nurturing and Adam's instruction highlight the importance of moral guidance. Each life carries the potential to shape others positively, leaving a legacy that endures beyond physical existence. Life as a continuum. Their deaths teach that life and death are interconnected. Death is not an end, but a continuation, a transition toward deeper understanding, spiritual fulfillment, and connection with the divine. Apocryphal and Ethiopian insights. Ethiopian biblical texts, particularly the Book of Adam and Eve, provide vivid descriptions of the final moments of the first humans. These texts depict Adam and Eve preparing spiritually for death through prayer, fasting, and reflection. In these accounts, death is not feared, but embraced as a sacred passage, an opportunity to complete the human journey with awareness and devotion. The apocryphal texts also portray their deaths as events with cosmic significance. Adam and Eve's transition from life to death is depicted as a shift in the spiritual fabric of the world, symbolizing humanity's first encounter with mortality and the enduring consequences of human choice. These texts emphasize that the final moments of the first humans were not private tragedies, but foundational events shaping the destiny of all humankind. Philosophical implications. The deaths of Adam and Eve also invite philosophical reflection. Their story challenges humanity to confront fundamental questions about existence. What does it mean to live responsibly? How do we prepare for mortality? How can understanding our limitations enhance our moral and spiritual lives? By observing the first humans facing death, we learn that the end of life can be as instructive as life itself. Their passing demonstrates the value of reflection, the importance of ethical guidance, and the transformative power of accepting life's impermanence. These lessons remain timeless, resonating across cultures, religions, and eras. Contemporary relevance. Even today, the story of Adam and Eve's final moments holds relevance. It encourages us to consider our own mortality, the impact of our choices, and the legacy we leave behind. In a world often focused on immediate gratification and transient achievements, the first humans' deaths remind us to live with purpose, mindfulness, and a sense of moral responsibility. Their deaths also inspire spiritual reflection. By understanding that life is finite yet connected to the divine, we are encouraged to cultivate wisdom, compassion, and ethical awareness. Adam and Eve's passing illustrates that death, rather than being a source of fear, can be a guide, a teacher that frames the meaning of existence and the importance of living rightly. Death as eternal lesson. Ultimately, the final moments of Adam and Eve are eternal lessons precisely because they transcend the physical and temporal. Their deaths illuminate core truths about human life, the inevitability of mortality, the significance of moral choice, the responsibility to guide future generations, and the potential for spiritual reconciliation. Adam and Eve's deaths teach that life is a journey of learning, reflection, and ethical engagement. Their final moments are not merely historical footnotes or mythic curiosities. They are a mirror in which humanity can see its own struggles, responsibilities, and opportunities. Their passing reminds us that death is part of life's sacred rhythm, a moment to recognize what truly matters and to pass wisdom, love, and guidance forward. The deaths of Adam and Eve were far more than personal endings. They marked humanity's first encounter with mortality, its first experience of life's fragility, and the enduring hope of divine mercy. Adam's passing reflected endurance, awareness, and spiritual responsibility. Eve's departure embodied wisdom, courage, and the nurturing of humanity's moral compass. Together, their final moments illustrate that death is not merely an end, but a continuation, a bridge connecting the first life to the legacy of countless generations. By studying their deaths, we learn essential truths about the human condition. Mortality teaches awareness and humility. Life carries responsibility beyond the individual. Failure can be met with redemption. Guidance shapes future generations. And ultimately, life and death are intertwined, forming a continuum that connects all of humanity to its divine origin. Adam and Eve may have been the first humans to die, but their final moments continue to teach, inspire, and guide humanity. Their deaths are eternal lessons, a testament to life's fragility, its moral weight, and the enduring hope that every human being, regardless of missteps, can seek connection with the divine and leave a legacy of wisdom for those who follow. The story of Adam and Eve does not end in tragedy. It ends in understanding. From the garden's glory to the grave's silence, their journey mirrors our own, a path of trial, forgiveness, and return to the Creator. Their final breath was not defeat, but fulfillment, the closing of the first covenant between God and humanity. As we remember their story, we remember our origin, our purpose, and our hope. The first humans may have died, but their legacy lives on, written in the soul of every generation that followed.